Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
I'm actually very comfortable right now.
Are you?
Thank you, yes.
Really?
Oh, you're not uncomfortable?
Not uncomfortable, not yet.
We haven't installed those spikes on your seat yet to where you feel very
I just
uncomfortable
got
the whole time.
with the spikes on my seat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Turn them up.
Let's turn them up, yeah. We
That
do.
made no sense.
We want this to be
Let's
uncomfortable on every level possible right now. I think we're getting close to reaching it. Maybe we could get there if we had a really uncomfortable voicemail.
Yes.
Maybe.
I don't know how uncomfortable this voicemail is, but
just let's go.
here it is.
Hello, my friends. I had a question for you all. We just took a family vacation. I can't speak. A family vacation this last weekend. And I was just wondering, what has been your favorite family vacation? Thanks for everything that you do, guys.
Wow. All right. What's your favorite family vacation? Who wants to go first?
Jess.
Okay. Mm-hmm. My favorite one was right after COVID. We couldn't fly or anything, and we drove to Florida with our kids, and we took our time. We didn't rush anything. We stopped when we needed to. We let them get a snack at the gas station, and we didn't really have a lot of plans. We created more time to not have those stressful situations.
It was just the snack at the gas station part that
you know that is something that kids do not get,
my
and
kids
they love. That's why
literally. Sorry to interrupt this, but our neighbor kid came home to our house 2 days ago, and my wife is like, Sutton was looking for you. He was so excited because his mom let him stop at the gas station on their way back from Colorado, and he bought 2 primes.
Oh.
So that, right when you said that, I'm like, exactly. I know exactly what you mean. Sorry. Finish the story. It just brought up that silly story.
And so then we just, when we went, it wasn't we had a lot of plans. And so we had a house that we were going to stay at for the week, and it was just nice. And it was just one of those things where you don't realize it's going to be relaxing or all the memories until you're kind of on the way back or thinking back on it. But it was just such a sweet time that our kids still talk about. And I think just not putting a lot of structure or expectations on kids, especially, or on each other as spouses, and just enjoying that time. We don't just do that very often in life, or you don't do it intentionally. And so to me, that was probably one of the best.
We going in this?
I don't care.
Direction.
Either way. Are you ready, or do you want?
I'm not ready yet.
Okay. Yeah. You brought up the pandemic, and I think that was kind of a catalyst for my family to go, hey, there's a lot of stuff we wanted to do, and for whatever reason, you just make excuses not to do it.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes, vacations are financially stressing, but then you also can realize maybe where your priorities have been, in a bad place sometimes. So you kind of just make sacrifices other ways. But we took a few different trips that were really memorable after, over the past 3 years after the pandemic. And one of my favorites was going to New York with my kids. It's just something I've always wanted to do. It was I was turning 40 that year, and I'm like, I want to do something kind of for me. Not that I don't do anything for me, but it was that was kind of the big, hey, let's do this. It's a great experience just to, it's something that I've only seen in movies and things like that. And you just kind of build up this idea of what it is. And I think it was just cool to experience it. And a lot of the tropes about the city are true. It's pretty smelly and noisy and all of that stuff. But it was just a fun adventure to navigate the city and just be with your family in a different place. My kids are a little older, so they were able to have fun and help navigate the subway system and pick restaurants to go eat at and places to visit and things like that. And being able to visit the 9/11 museum and things like that, just where there's things that they've heard about, but they get to kind of experience it. And that was probably one of my favorites.
You guys all come back with matching Rolexes, fake Rolexes, and Oakley glasses too.
No, but there's an ongoing joke because we, about a year before that, had visited LA, and on the Santa Monica Pier, there's the people that dress up in costumes, and there was an Elmo, And then they just look so bad, right? That you can tell it's Elmo, but it's the most cheap knockoff costume of Elmo. And it's just to the point of it's kind of creepy. And my son Dexter found it so hilarious. Like he just could not stop thinking about this kind of creepy Elmo. And he would joke about him being in the bathroom at the hotel and just saying this stupid stuff. And so when we got to New York, of course, on Times Square, here's this almost identical creepy Elmo. So the thought of this, scary Elmo following us across the country was pretty funny. And he just he'd see you had kids and they just run for you because they want, to charge you for a picture. So
talk like Elmo, like
Mama, love you.
Yeah.
Eric, I will say,
like that.
I've never told you this, but I love the way that you travel with your family, and I've always secretly thought you and Christina should have a blog because you just had so many life experiences. But you really inspired me on your trips during that time because I feel like you do a good job including your whole family and your kids. And I loved how you're in New York and you could be like, oh, we're gonna eat at this place and this place, but I saw it on social media, you let them choose the restaurants and be a part of it, and that has influenced me in our next trips. I have my kids research where we're going and where do you want to go.
Yeah,
but I just love that you do that. It's inspiring to me.
I will add a note that it's it's probably different for different people. I mean, I think for our kids, we've tried to expose them to different types of foods and let them learn to like that stuff for themselves. If you maybe are the family that only eats McDonald's, that might not be as fun to let them pick where you go. But it is one of those things that I think it does. It helps them feel like they're part of the experience.
I love
more.
that.
Yeah.
I think, for me, probably we got to go to Disney this last year. And so there's just nothing like watching your kids light up. I never went there once as a child. And, it was like a bucket list thing that we were able to have happen. And so it was just so fun to see your kids in that kind of environment. And the kids that I'm this one's going to be totally afraid of every roller coaster. Not at all. So it was just it was a ton of fun. So
would you say it was magical?
Emotional,
emotional, all of it. It was great. So,
all right. There you go. Thanks for your
Good
voicemail.
question.
It's always good. Spark some good conversation. We do appreciate that, and it didn't start any conflict, which is good.
Agreed.
Because what we're going to be talking about next is taking a stand versus causing conflict. This is something that's very common in Christian culture, and we're going to dive into that a little bit more here in just a moment. Taking a stand versus causing conflict. Do you ever take sides on this? Do you ever think you're taking a stand and realizing you're causing conflict? Is it even possible to take a stand without causing conflict? So many ways of looking at this, but boy, there is no shortage of things in our culture to stand up against. But how do we navigate the complexities of being in the world, but not of the world, right? That's a classic saying we say all the time. Do we really understand what that means? Any thoughts before we dive into some examples of this? Any clarity you want to bring to this conversation?
Yeah, I just think, it's going to constantly be something. I mean, there is just a constant cycle of probably noteworthy things, newsworthy things that I think, especially as Christians who are quote unquote in the world but not of the world, it's an important conversation to have. And it can be an exhausting conversation. And they're just, at the end of the day, how do we pick our battles? Maybe that's, the hill I want to die on, whatever you want to say. And so it's complex. And with each new kind of iteration of something that pops up in culture, I think we get to make those decisions probably more often than we realize. So.
There have been a lot of examples of this recently popping up into all sorts of aspects of our lives. One of those is with the Anheuser Busch company and their partnership with a transgender activist. They faced quite a backlash from Bud Light drinkers who decided they were not going to drink Bud Light anymore. You had Kid Rock with his gun out there shooting up all his cans of Bud Light. I saw where Garth Brooks was opening a new bar and was going to include Bud Light and got a lot of backlash for that. His fan base was not happy. But it didn't really stop there. I think sometimes you see these things where there's these boycotts that don't really go anywhere. This one, I mean, might be a little different because they did see their stock price drop about 5%. With a loss of $4.5 billion in their market cap. I mean, that's something. I mean, this feels much more like one of those culture wars that we've been seeing, I don't know, for a lot more lately, but any thoughts on this one?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's not necessarily tied to Pride Month, but there's definitely, as our culture is becoming, more and more a culture that's wrestling through ideas of people that are part of the LGBTQ plus community, trans, activists and things like that. That's really what this one was focused around, and then putting Dylan on a can and all that kind of stuff. I think it's just going to be something that we at large in society, even outside of Christendom, are going to continue to have to kind of wrestle with as we define these types of things. And so, but yeah, I think one of the things that has, as you mentioned, a lot of times these things maybe pop up, they pop up for a week, they become popular for a week, but people ultimately are so loyal to a brand, or it starts to inconvenience them. And then they are just like, no, I'm okay. I did it. I did the post about it. I shot the can like Kid Rock did or whatever, but then they don't really follow through with it. You read everybody's comments on Facebook all the time. I'm never shopping here again. I'm never drinking. I'm never eating this again. And then you're like, 2 weeks later,
I'm never going to Chick-fil-A again.
That's why I
and
wondered
then
if,
they start going through the drive-through.
Right.
Yeah.
If that dip in their stock, is it longevity or not?
And then it's interesting to see companies pivot, because then I think they fired the person that was in charge of that marketing campaign and all those kind of things. I mean, I do not. There's people that follow this so intensely and they can tell you every detail. I don't.
Yeah.
Those are just mostly things I hear. But yeah, I think that's interesting.
I will say that you brought up Garth Brooks, and he does his live at Studio G every day. And I would totally recommend anybody looking up his response, because I think that somebody with that level of firepower could really have used his platform to say I'm this way or I'm that way. But his response was that's the type of person I want to be, where he was just very calm, addressed everybody, validated both sides, and said, this is what we're doing, and this is how it's going to be. And I respected the way that he went about it.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a great example of just how to handle a lot of things. So,
and it is when a company, now it seems like the pendulum swung, because I think that was March or April when that happened. And now that it's moved into Pride Month, there's a lot of now LGBTQ plus kind of bars or Pride events that are obviously happening this month, that because of how Bud Light, how they feel like they shrank back and they kind of rejected, them as a whole, and they kind of listened to society, that they didn't have their back. And now, so a lot of, LGBTQ plus members or bars or clubs or whatever events that would probably typically have had, their drinks or whatever in it, have said, well, now we're going to be on that side and we're going to boycott you and things like that. And so there's this
backlash is going both ways. Yeah, it is interesting. And I think it's, maybe we've talked about this before, but it just seems like if it's a corporation, I'm not so much talking about a local mom pop, type of business, but I think when you're talking about corporations, when you see them make these moves, you have to keep in mind that this is about the bottom line. So they made a decision that they thought was going to help them sell more Bud Light. End of story.
Right.
Yeah, and they didn't. Okay, and so then they try to pivot, and then that's going to hurt them in other ways. But I just think when you support a corporation specifically because of whatever moral or cultural thing they're going after, just know that they're not doing that because they care so much about that. They're doing it because they're looking at the bottom line. And you're a consumer and they want to convince you to buy their product. And if they can do that through emotion, then they've succeeded. And because then you have like this brand loyalty to them. And if it's something that you're passionate about, then better for them. So it's just, I think we really have to be careful and know that instead of like letting ourselves dive headfirst into these culture wars. Just know that you're being manipulated either way. And it's just about their bottom line at the end of the day. It has nothing to do with the actual thing that's going on. They're just trying to sell their product. And it's a tough thing to realize sometimes because we want to have that tribal feeling of pride and ownership and this is my brand, and it's just about making money. That's really what it's about.
And we've talked about even like the Jesus fish, and even that kind of being a marketing ploy. Like I think a lot of companies are going to have to wrestle over the next few years with seeing some of these examples. Like Target is another one where they released a whole, pride kind of
which that was a whole other type of mess too.
Yeah.
And they're trying to figure out, I think, navigate how much can we, be a part of Pride Month? How much do we, turn our logos into rainbows and a lot of those kind of typical things that you'll see during the month of Pride. But then there's a lot of companies that are like facing more and more backlash than they ever did. And some of it's because of how maybe forward they put it or how much like a company needs to make sure everybody knows that. But then at the end of the day, a lot of the people, like for example, the whole Target thing, I have an uncle that's only ever worked at Target since he was 16, and he's worked his way up into the corporation, and now he kind of leads an entire store. And things happen all the time, that are out of his purview. They come and set up displays, all that kind of stuff. And he's like,
not a lot of control.
He's like, in 1 week, my retirement because of people's, rejecting of Target and a lot of things that were happening there, it tanked like he's never seen, before because of, people that are saying yes or no or rejecting a brand. And he's like, my opinions about this are not at all, represented maybe by the company or I work here. This is my only job. This is how I feed my family. This is what I do. Right. And so he's like, I don't get a say in really our marketing and how all that happens. And so there are a lot of ways there's people living in the tension that work for these organizations that are kind of being represented in one way or another and are the ones really suffering for the decisions at large by, marketing or those in other offices that maybe are further from being boots on the ground. And so I think even considering that in our decisions is something that we have to think about when there's these big corporations. I mean, truck drivers with the whole Bud Light thing. There's a lot more people affected by this than sometimes we realize.
I always think about that.
This Target thing went really far because you had people going into the store. There's videos on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube of these extreme right-wing activists going through the store and accusing Target employees of being child molesters because there were children's clothes with pro-trans messages, and they would or even customers in the store, they would confront them and go, do you agree with this? And if they said yes, they'd like call them out and say they were child molesters and things like that and try to like platform their opinion by doing this. And the other side of it is they hired a specific artist to do a lot of the designs for the t-shirts and things like that they were selling, who is like a known Satanist. And so he has his own personal designs that he's made that have satanic messages on them as well as different types of trans messages. And so people started to conflate that and go, okay, they're selling this shirt that has a satanic message on it in Target. And all these people started sharing it on social media, and here the conspiracy theories start blowing up. And so it's like, even still, it's like not the whole truth, but people will believe anything to push their agenda. And I think that's the thing that's always frustrated me with the conspiracy side of this stuff is it's like, even like, let's just stick to the truth and the facts of it and talk about it. Like, you can be upset about it, but like, let's just stick to the facts. Like, don't try to push your agenda by finding other things that aren't whole truths. And you might not even know the truth, but you just add it to your talking points to get your point across, and you don't care whether it's true or not. And I think, to me, that's always frustrated me, because I'm like, we can be upset about something and talk about it and say, hey, this isn't okay or whatever, but don't co-opt conspiracy theories and other mistruths into your argument, because at the end of the day, it completely makes it void of any
It's basically
value.
making an assumption to make what you think your argument is a stronger argument.
Yeah.
And again, I think the other thing that's fascinating about both of these that are more recent and pretty large corporations is then they both went pretty all in on, their messaging towards the LGBTQ plus community, and then got a lot of backlash from, those that were not a fan of what they were doing. And then they really pivoted in a big way from what their plans were, their marketing plans, even the displays at Target.
Yeah.
And then they get backlash again on the other side because, well, now you were bold enough to put this out there, and then you've kind of walked away from, championing that cause.
The bottom line.
And so, exactly. And so I saw people, on the other end, maybe that weren't what we label right-wing conservative people, that would go in and, there was a mom I saw on a TikTok video going in and saying, my kid, for the first time ever, felt like they belonged because they walked into a Target and they saw, rainbows at the front of the store. Now I'm not taking my kid ever to Target again, because now they're going to know on the other side that, if there's an outcry from society, then they're going to be labeled, So on both sides of that conversation, because of, a lot of what you're saying, the bottom line, it becomes... It just would be interesting to sit in some of those corporate offices now to think of how they're reevaluating.
Yeah.
And the examples, I think these two are going to be pretty big examples for companies moving forward.
Right. Yeah.
I think in positive ways, no matter what, on how do we handle these things, and so it's going to be interesting to see how those are two big case studies. I think the first ones that I think really affected the bottom line in a big way. That's going to be interesting to see how that is moving forward.
It's interesting because it feels like in the beginning that where we talked about Anheuser Busch and Target so far, but they took a stand, but then caused conflict by the change.
They walked it back.
So it's
yeah.
And then we're left kind of in the middle.
Which, if that doesn't make it obvious that it's about the bottom line, that they're willing to just go whatever way the market leads.
And look how much publicity it gets.
So
happens.
We never thought we'd see Chick-fil-A go woke, but here we go. No, but that is something that's been going around also in another headline. This one comes from the New York Times, but it says that why Chick-fil-A is drawing fire over a culture of belonging, and this is surrounding a new position that they hired. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think they hired a vice president. I don't know if he was someone in the company, but created a position for a vice president of diversity, equality, and inclusion, which has been in a lot of corporations a recent, I think, either somebody getting hired for that or an entire department kind of focusing on diversity, equality, and inclusion. And so for a lot of people, it's got, ties to social justice, activism, all of that kind of stuff. And so, and again, you brought that word up in jest, like that word woke, and with a lot of this, maybe the Target thing and the Bud Light thing, the Anheuser Busch thing, and there's this phrase that keeps going around, almost like a victory cry of "go woke, go broke." That's what happens. See what happens. You go woke, you go broke. But for me, every time I hear that word, I'm like, what in the world does that mean?
Yeah.
I even tried to put it out on my own Instagram. What does that mean? I asked the question, what do you mean by woke? And then I asked, do you think everybody has the same definition? And almost everybody, all but one person that answered me. So 95% of people were like, no, not everybody defines woke in the same way. And then I'm like, is woke good or bad? And I would not, by how I would define woke, not one person that answered mine is woke, but it was split. And who would say woke is a good word or woke is a bad word? So even when we use that language, this term woke, it is so, we know that not everybody defines it the same way, but it's just such this all-encompassing word that really has not a true meaning because nobody even believes it means the same thing. And some people celebrate it as, hey, it is moving towards more diversity, seeing seeing other people, seeing the marginalized, and they would celebrate it in that way. And then you've got another side of people like, no, it's just trying to push an agenda on people and all that. And so, oh man, it's just so exhausting.
Well, I think originally when the term came about, it meant to be aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. So, I mean, majority of people, I think early on when they just start hearing the term woke, it's like, okay, this is a good thing. This means that I have awoken to what's happening around me. I understand now that there are injustices that I've been unaware of. Maybe I've even contributed to in certain ways unintentionally. And the more I know, the better I can help, the better I can position myself to help others to be in a place of understanding and empathy.
Right.
And so, like, at its core, being woke was not looked at for quite a while as a bad thing. It was something good. It was self-development. It was someone improving themselves, someone saying, hey, I'm going beyond my narrow view of my own opinions to understand how decisions in the world affect others who are less fortunate to me or of different races, whatever that might be, wasn't a bad thing. But then, like so many things, it gets co-opted by some movement or a political agenda or what have you. And now we have the term that is woke, and it's a joke. You know, it's just become this thing that people say when they disagree with something. I mean, I don't even know if this is the right place to bring it up, but even this past week, I think it was, like, we had our own little instance on our social media account where we posted some new art for the upcoming series, and it had multiple colors in it. It was definitely not a rainbow.
No.
I've been doing graphic design myself for many years, and I can explain what a rainbow is versus just a gradient or an ombre of several colors coming together. Anyways, I mean, we had people, I think they're mostly outside of our church community, who were just trying to suggest that this was for Pride Month or whatever. And, you know, it's just interesting to see that, or even some were suggesting it was satanic or different things like that. You know, it's just people are looking for controversy. I don't know that it's about taking a stand, but it's about winning a war, and a culture war. And I don't even think they know what the reward is. Like, what are they winning? What do they think they're going to accomplish by just trying to always have their feelers out for anything that they don't agree with? It's just crazy.
And I think it's like instigating too.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, Pride Month. It was like, I'm disappointed in this or that. And I think that, like, I get a great picture of myself in those moments where I'm like, I want to go off. I think I text you guys or somebody, and I was like, I'm really restraining myself. And then, because I just have to, like, pause, because I know if I come in hot, I come in hot.
And I just, some of those things you have to realize you're feeding the machine.
Yeah,
there. And
exactly.
It's so tempting to jump in there.
And creating conflict isn't always, like, the best way. It's like, how do you navigate through it? Because conflict feels like a battle. And I'm always thinking, like, what's the other side look like?
Yeah.
And I don't want to get caught up in just just that one thing. It's like, I want to, what does it look like past it? Who am I past this conflict?
Well, and a hard lesson I've had to learn in those situations is that once people have made up their mind, that interaction online is just not going to change anything. It's just, they've already made up their mind, and they're going to pivot and argue with you in circles no matter what facts or information you bring to them. It's not going to actually change their mind because they've already made up their mind. They're not looking to learn, they're looking to win.
Yeah. And that posture of help me understand is difficult. And I think part of it is, like, we are, all of us probably to some extent, some of us just probably know it more or have seen it more in our lives, acknowledged it more. There's just things that have become a part of who we are, our upbringing, that, like, send us on these witch hunts in some ways. Like, another one that's outside of even the purview of corporation, and there's a whole podcast about this, and I'm not saying you should listen to it, but a whole podcast that's been an interesting kind of cultural dichotomy of J.K. Rowling, who is the person that wrote Harry Potter, and the premise of that kind of podcast and even the cultural movement around that was that in the early 90s when Harry Potter was coming out, that by and large, Christian society rejected, Harry Potter and witchcraft.
Oh, I was not allowed.
It was a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That was a part of kind of the Harry Potter movement. And those who embraced it really were the outcasts, were people that saw themselves as different. A lot of people that would have found themselves in the LGBTQ plus community and all that. And so the premise of this is J.K. Rowling, who's just an individual, but now
author.
Kind of it's a pretty powerful franchise, Harry Potter.
She's a public figure now with a lot of influence. Yeah.
Has said things about, human sexuality and what it means to be male and female. And then, so now she's caught a lot of flack for those comments. And then in the Christian society, or maybe the more conservative society, have now more embraced, J.K. Rowling as a author, and just even been able to even find gospel narrative inside of her story and inside of the Harry Potter franchise. And those who were once identified the most with it are the ones that are kind of rejecting it and finding this. So it's just this weird dichotomy, again, on a micro level of, I think what we saw in a really fast layer of with Anheuser Busch and Target over the last few months of things that serve us, and maybe even our poor understanding and lack of ability to say, help me understand, and our willingness to be preached to without actually going to scripture, and not even necessarily actually preaching and going to scripture, but having one person with a lot of influence tell us how to think. I mean, groupthink is just, it's been around. It's always going to be around. And how much we are willing to say yes, put our stamp of approval based on another person's stamp of approval and willingness to stand up. And we don't do the hard work of forming our own opinion and doing the investigation ourselves.
All right. So how can Christians do a better job at discerning between, core convictions and personal preferences? Because a lot of this comes down to, are we actually fighting a just war in these things, these outrage culture wars? Or is it just something that we've been conditioned to believe because of our Western culture and other types of maybe misinterpretations of scripture, things like that, or just even your own subculture of your upbringing and your family and things like that, that you just learn a certain way and you have bias and prejudice. And how do we discern as Christians? How do we navigate that? Because it's a really messy landscape of things to navigate.
I think it's pausing the podcast, rewinding 30 seconds, and re-listening to what you just said. Because that's the difference between us having asking ourselves those questions. We need to ask ourselves those questions, or else we're blindly going into battle, and we don't know why we're doing the things we're doing, so we can fly off the handle, or maybe we have a false sense of strength or knowledge about something. But it's like, we need to ask those questions, like, why do I believe the things I do? Where is this conviction? Did I grow up with this, and do I still think that now? Because those are the things where it's like that becomes a reflection of who you are. What you decide to stand for, or to stand for in conflict, that's the picture that I'm getting of you.
Yeah.
And I think, man, that sometimes those lines are so fuzzy between personal preference and core convictions. And sometimes it's easy for my personal preferences to elevate to the level of, what a core conviction is. I think music style is one of those, even internally at CCC and a lot of other places, we've seen, or elevating, certain things to that level, which we're willing to break relationship over, that we're willing to separate over, break community over. And the older I get, I feel like the less of those I have, that I'm willing to break fellowship over.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think it's questions like, help me understand, or not assuming the worst in somebody. And again, I think that's at the end of the day, a not hidden, but like a goal of this podcast is to put you in proximity to thoughts, ideas, stories that are different than yours. It's not always to put you in proximity to other Christians that think exactly the same way as you, but to put you into proximity with maybe people that don't even follow Jesus, but see how that affects their life and how their stories are evolved around that. Or two Christians that both love Jesus really well and have separate convictions or separate personal preferences, but to help us in the discipleship process of iron sharpening iron. And iron sharpening iron is not like a passive pillow fight type of thing. It's like iron sharpening iron is abrasive. It means having difficult conversations. It means us having a little bit of our own iron chipped away, right? To become a sharp edge again. And so I think that's a part of it.
Well, and I think when I was growing up, I experienced this kind of false sense of safety. You had, I grew up in a pretty stable Christian home. My dad was a pastor. My siblings were all believers, and it felt safe, And then as you get older and you start to see behind the curtain where maybe something isn't going well, or maybe someone in your, my siblings have been divorced or remarried and different things like that. There's been different turmoil things that happen. And as a kid, you start to feel this like, okay, the ship's rocking. Like what's going on? And you're realizing that, okay, for one, you thought everything was fine and safe and in a controlled state, but now you're losing control, and you realize you didn't ever have control over that. And so you start to grasp for things that you can control. I think there's, people have talked about that when there's people have addictions, and Jess, you could probably speak to this, but they look for something, whether it's porn or drugs or alcohol or whatever, that they control. They can control those situations because they feel out of control. And I think the culture wars that we see are another thing where, even when you have campaign slogans from politicians that are things like "Make America Great Again," it resonates because it's telling people you used to be in control of this. You used to be everything used to be better, and now it's not. And so people are grabbing from control, and the more that they feel like they're losing it, the more desperate they get, the more confrontational they get, the more hateful they get, and they don't even see it sometimes because they're so desperate to gain that control. So I think when anything comes up that feels like it's out of their control, they're going to react this way. And I think when we're discerning it as Christians, that's the part where we get it wrong a lot of times, because we're just thinking, we're losing control. We must stand up for this. We must fight, and we're going to win, And it's like, yes, we're promised to win, but not in that way, not in this vain, yay, I got a trophy and I won the soccer game way, or whatever it is. It's like an eternal thing. It's something, that's much bigger and much broader. And you think about all the souls and the bodies that we leave behind just because we want to win some culture war, that they don't even have an opportunity to meet Jesus because the Jesus you're introducing them to is awful.
Yeah.
That's not who Jesus is, and you're misrepresenting him. And that's who you're showing everyone else. And you think that's okay because you're trying to win some frivolous thing that doesn't matter.
And the more hopeless we are, another campaign slogan is hope, so many, campaign slogans are run on like, hey, we have this underlying brokenness that's a part of who we are, and we're gonna be the one that's gonna deliver you on hope, or making this place great again, nostalgia, deliver you on the good old days or the better future. And it's so much when we're looking for that hope in political figures, politicians, in spaces that are outside of the kingdom of God, that it's feeble.
It's almost a reflection of the corporation thing. Two sides of the same coin. Republican, Democrat, whatever. It's the same thing. They're selling you something. They want your vote, whatever.
Right.
And they're going to give you a message. And if they can get you worked up about it so that you can join the team, then that's just better for them. They don't care what collateral damage is along the way.
And we're so set on the quick fix. So boycott them. Don't go here. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And I have to remember, in discernment, it doesn't always mean the quickest to speak, because listening takes time. Listening and hearing somebody's story takes time. I think, like, I run with endurance the race set before me. It's not like the little, like, quick little sprint, 100-meter sprint that I'm going to get to the end of and then have it fixed. It's like I'm running a longer race, And that takes time. And we get so caught up in the here and now that we lose sight of that. And we don't listen to people's stories or pause and think about how we're coming across or how we're representing Jesus. And that's such an integral part of, I think, as Christ followers, like what we should be thinking more about.
Yeah, I think even that being, quick to listen, slow to speak. I mean, James, Jesus' brother, he talks about this entire thing. There's life and death. The power of life and death are in our tongue. And oftentimes we speak things that are venomous or speak things that are death into people. And then he follows up that idea of life and death being the power of the tongue. And he says, if anybody lacks wisdom, ask God. And he generously gives wisdom without reproach. So if you ask God for wisdom, man, about this, how do I handle this certain situation? Should I continue to shop here? Should I stand up here? Is this my preference or is this my conviction? Ask God, and I think he will indeed give that to us. Or I think another place where that whole in the world but not of the world idea comes from is Romans 12:2, where it says, don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good, acceptable, and perfect. And I think a reminder for what that passage means is we have to be constantly transformed. It's this invitation that daily I'm being transformed. It's not just a one-time thing, but that word metamorpho that's being used for transformation is looking at like a butterfly in the daily process of transformation that's happening. And so inviting God on a daily basis to be breathing life into us, inviting God on a daily basis for wisdom, and not just like this one-time genie in a bottle, I asked for that and it's going to happen. And so I think those are a few pieces of scripture that could lead us in this conversation as well, too.
Well, I think as Christians, one of the best things we can do is introduce people to Jesus. And that's where the work starts happening, right? We let the Holy Spirit do the work that he tells us he will do. And that is another form of us losing control. And I know that can be hard to do, but it's really the best, because when we introduce someone to Jesus, let him do the work, and we love this person, we care for them, and we demonstrate Christ's love in a positive way that isn't just about our own agenda, then that's really what I think the Christian walk is about. So I'm sure a lot more could be said about this topic. We could go on and on, but I think we covered it pretty well for the most part. So thanks everybody for listening. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, something that you feel like we missed, maybe we missed a point that you would have brought up, let us know. You can send us an email to podcast@cccomaha.org. You can reach out to us on social media on Instagram or TikTok @CCCOMA podcast. Also, leave us a voicemail at 402-885-9930. We'd love to hear your beautiful voices. But until next time, we'll talk to you then with one quick note, we should probably mention coming up soon. I think we'll have one more episode next week after this, and then we'll be taking a short little break for the month of July, and then we'll see you back in August. So
great time. If you have feedback or you want to see the show go a certain direction or have an idea, man, flood us with all those.
Let's do.
It'll be fun.
So, all right. Talk to you all then. Bye-bye.